Welcome to the Register's Report. My name is John Buckley. I'm the Register of Deeds for Plymouth County. This show is about Plymouth County real estate. I'll be reporting on the July numbers as this is in August taping. Our headline for the month was real estate continues to be good through the summer. I'm going to have a great guest in my second segment, John Holmgren of J.K. Holmgren Engineering, talking about the role of surveyors, and then we're going to do a little Plymouth County history. So first you're going to see a bar chart of deeds. Deeds are sales of property. We had 1,013 deeds recorded in July, down from the 1,244 in June, down 1% from the 10,028 from July of last year. However, for the first 7 months of the year, we're up 7%. The next image you're going to see is of mortgages. Mortgages are when people usually take money out to buy property, or whether they choose when they own property to try to refinance it for a lower rate. There were 1,749 mortgages recorded in July, less than the 2016 in June, down 13% compared to last July. A lot of people have stopped refinancing. The rates have been bumping around a little bit, although many people are still taking out mortgages to purchase property. Year to date, through 7 months, mortgages are down 9%. The next image you're going to see is of foreclosure deeds. A foreclosure deed is when a lender has taken back ownership of a property, usually for failure to pay the mortgage. Many people have difficulty with job loss, health issues, and other family debt that can put them in great difficulty. I will warn everybody, if you find yourself headed for trouble, please reach out to a federal housing counselor to try to modify your loan. There were 47 foreclosure deeds recorded in July, less than the 51 in June, 20% less than the 59 in July of last year. Many of the lenders are getting caught up. However, a lot less people are finding themselves in difficulty. The next image you're going to see is a foreclosure notice. That's the first document we see at the registry that shows somebody's in trouble. 65 foreclosure notices in July, 83 in June. Those are also down 24% lower than last year. Since the 2008 crisis, it does seem as if people are getting more of a handle on their ownership, and that's a good thing. The next image you're going to see is foreclosure deeds and notices by community. We do that every month. Traditionally, Brockton, Plymouth, and Wareham are communities having the most difficulty, although foreclosures have hit every community in Plymouth County over the last number of years. Couple quick notes. Training room will be open again for training, free training of our online system on Thursday, September 7th. Please call in advance, 508-830-9290, because space is limited. You can also find in our website a property fraud alert that you can sign up for free. Anything going against your property, you'll be notified by email. Beware of deed scams that are out there, particularly one from a California company that tries to get you to pay $83 to get a copy of your deed, when you can get it at our office for $1 a page. Our next office hours will be in Kingston Town Hall from 10 to noon on September 28th. Please join us if you have any issues you'd like to discuss. My guest on the next segment of the show is John Holmgren of J.K. Holmgren Engineers, discussing the role of a surveyor in the real estate process. Thank you.
After 15 years of smoking, Eva Marie quit. There's a new lung cancer screening that could save her life. You stopped smoking. Now start screening. Learn more at savedbythescan.org.
Welcome back to the Register's Report. Again, my name is John Buckley. I'm the Register of Deeds of Plymouth County. And in this segment of the show, we always try to do something educational in nature. We've had commercial real estate brokers, we've had assessors, we've had appraisers, and countless real estate professionals. I have a great guest today that plays a very important role in the real estate market, John Holmgren. John, welcome.
John, always nice to be with you.
And John is of J.K. Holmgren Engineers, and we're going to talk a little bit about the role of the surveyor and other functions that you participate in the real estate market. So welcome onto the show.
Thank you very much, John.
So why don't we start by sharing with our viewers a little bit about your company.
Certainly. I've been the president and owner of J.K. Holmgren Engineering since 1984, providing all kinds of civil services throughout Plymouth County. Prior to that, I was the Brockton City Engineer and Public Works Commissioner. So I have a wide array of experience in both the public and private areas. We do the full gamut, as I said, plot plans, mortgage plot plans, septic repairs and designs, title insurance surveys, and a lot of flood elevation certificates recently.
Well, that's certainly a wide array of services. And so let's start with plot plans. And I know we've had conversations before that a lot of people think plot plans, although they get them at their closing, because you do them for the closing. A lot of people think they're recorded at the Registry of Deeds, but why don't you just talk about how you go about doing plot plans?
Well, in general, the plot plan or the deed is actually provided to us either by the owner, either the buyer or the seller, or the agent that is trying to make the sale. And from that deed, we have to research at the Plymouth Registry to find out if there's a plan on record of it. Then you go out and you do a cloth tape survey. You don't do an actual on-the-ground survey, largely because there's not a lot of fee involved in that. But you have to do enough to at least identify the two front corners and make sure that the house is in conformance with the zoning of the town.
And if someone had encroached onto somebody else's property, like a driveway that extended over, would you pick up that and those types of things?
Yes, in general you would, and if you notice that, you would notify your client that he has to do something about that actually before he would close on the real estate deal. And that, of course, happens frequently, especially when people buy property from people they know or from their parents, because they remember where this tree used to be the property line. Sure. And in many cases, maybe the tree's the property line, but maybe somebody put a driveway on your side of the tree. So a driveway, or in most cases, it's a fence encroachment usually, because people try to put the fence directly on their property line, and sometimes if they're off by a foot, it's on the abutter's property. So we always recommend that if you're going to install a fence, you should definitely contact not just a fence company, but a registered land surveyor. And they will, in general, put the fence 1 foot inside your property to give yourself a little bit of breathing room.
And who are the typical people that order the plot plans?
Usually it's a real estate agent, in most cases.
Yeah. And we've had people over the years that have come to us. They've had boundary disputes with people on hedges that people put in, or fences in the wrong place, and poured a basketball court that went over the line, and they need to work those things out. And the most truest and accurate way to decide that boundary is to bring in a surveyor.
Have to bring in a registered land surveyor, and in those cases, a lot of times, right, if you put in like a hedge fence, which is this wide when you start,
right.
The hedge fence keeps growing, and then in the backyard, someone sees the edge of the hedge fence and says, well, that's the edge of my property line, so I'll start my basketball court here. And then as 10 years go by, you find out the hedge is 5 feet over, the basketball court is 10 feet over, right. And so on and so forth.
Right.
And it can create problems. In most cases, they get resolved without going to court. Not in all cases. And we see a lot of that, like in You know, the downtown areas, downtown Plymouth, downtown Brockton, where the lots are fairly small, and everybody wants to get every square foot. So that's not a major staple, but it's something that happens all the time. I'd be less than honest if I told you sometimes we try and avoid those disputes because they're not always
As
friendly.
do we at the registry. Sometimes you can't avoid them.
Sometimes you can't avoid them. Right.
Yeah,
Right.
So I want to distinguish a plot plan from a subdivision plan, which I know you're also pretty active in preparing for
Right.
people.
On that type of a plan, you actually have to do a boundary survey of the entire lot, and you divide the property depending upon A, what the client wants, and B, what the zoning is for that particular property, making sure that you maintain proper offsets to any buildings that may or may not be on the property. On the larger tracts of land, besides the plot plan part of it, or the subdivided plot of it, you actually have to design a roadway that would go through there. And once again, the important thing is to make sure that the frontage and area is large enough to conform to whatever the zoning might be in a particular town.
Now, does that process take into consideration any local codes relative to fire issues? You know, the
Most definitely. Depending upon the length of the road, in certain towns, there is a maximum dead-end length, and if you're over X number of feet, you have to have a fire hydrant. In the cases where you don't have a fire, where you don't have, say, public water, you have to build a huge tank to actually hold the water below ground, which sometimes takes up a lot of land area. So each town has their different bylaws or the issues that have to be addressed, not just by the building department or the planning board, but by all the agencies in town. As far as fire protection, you need to have some sort of a road where, in general, the largest fire truck that they have in town is able to circumvent the property in the event of a fire.
So I know you also do work relative to septic systems.
We do.
A lot of our towns in Plymouth County aren't accessible, people aren't accessible to sewer lines, and you have to go through that whole process.
We have to do, in all septic systems now, if you're going to get a building permit or the addition on your property, you have to bring your system into conformance with the Mass State Code, which is called Title V. And that depends upon your soil condition, water table, and the size of the property and the number of bedrooms that you might want to have on the property. And once again, each town has their own code, which is a little more stringent, at least most towns have their own code, which is a little more stringent than what the state code would be. In many cases, we found, because of the way that they measure water table, a lot of properties now have to have a system that ends up being 4 feet above whatever the theoretical water table is. So as you drive around the county, you'll see like people in their front yard, they have a big bed, and that's where the septic system is.
So what is the process you go about with the contractor, I guess, to ascertain how that would proceed?
Well, the first thing you have to do is you have to do what's called a percolation test, which means you have to dig at least 2 to 3 holes on the property for a distance of at least 10 feet, or refusal, which means ledge, or if you find the water table. And from that, you have to start and be 4 feet above either the refusal or the water table, and you have to build your system up from there. And there are many different types of systems, and it really is site-specific.
So let's talk a little bit about flood zone certifications. I know you're involved in that process, and it's getting to be a really big issue. 13 of our 21 communities in Plymouth County are on the Atlantic Ocean or Buzzards Bay. This particular show goes to Plymouth, Kingston, and Duxbury, as well as Pembroke. 3 of those 4 towns are located on the ocean, Atlantic Ocean,
Right.
and Pembroke would also have the impact of the North River.
Correct. and that's become a big part of the business. The Flood Insurance Management Agency, FEMA, has developed these maps called firm maps, flood insurance rate map, and depending upon your exact location and the frequency of where that location might flood, they have these maps that show what the periodic flooding would be and how bad the flooding could be. And based upon that, the rate of your premium for the flood insurance, if you have a mortgage, can be very small or very large. Especially along the water, you have obviously the ocean waves, wind damage, velocity damage, and the premiums have become quite high. Part of the problem with it is that the maps are not updated frequently because the towns and cities that they're in, they don't have the resources to be able to prove to FEMA that they have made improvements in certain areas. So there are many homes actually throughout the county that would appear to be in a flood zone based upon the map drawn in a plan view, but by the elevation, they would not be the map because the home or the first floor would be above the floodplain. So in which case you have to file either a flood elevation certificate, which gets filed with the insurance agent, or you have to file a letter of map amendment called a LOMA with FEMA. And they review it and make a determination as to whether or not your property, even though your land might flood, your building might not flood, which would reduce your premium.
Yeah, I went to a meeting not too long ago in Marshfield. There must have been over 300 people there, and it was with FEMA.
FEMA.
And answering a lot of questions, and it just seems like so much of that is uncertain as you go forward.
That's correct. That's a good word for it.
Yeah.
And those people that actually lost their homes along that storm, I think they were called the no-name storm, when they did rebuild, they had to rebuild with a flood-proof type of a foundation, piers, keeping the first floor above, and making sure that the building would be knocked down in theory, with like a huge wave swell. So it gets very expensive.
And explain again in detail how you can minimize your insurance cost by the challenge.
Well, at least at my level, you need to file a flood elevation certificate. And if you can prove that in fact, that your first floor or your basement floor, if there's not anything in the basement floor of great value, is above the floodplain, then the insurance company can agree that you don't necessarily need flood insurance for the building, although your yard might flood. And one step further would be either a letter of map amendment called the LOMA, or a LOMA C, which is a letter of map change, where they would actually change the whole map. In other words, if like a whole street for some reason filed, then FEMA could see that in fact that it's really not in a floodplain, even though the maps that they have prepared would appear it. And they have different zones, A, Z, X, and depending upon the zone you're in, that's how they rate the premium, based upon the frequency of the flooding.
So I know many of the towns went out and appealed the FEMA maps, a couple of years ago. It may be still an ongoing process.
It's still an ongoing process,
Yeah.
It is, yes, yeah.
And so what year were those maps issued?
In 1979 is when FEMA was created, and the map started then. And like I said, they were supposed to be continually updated by the cities and towns that they were in. But with budgetary restraints, the cities and towns weren't really able to. So even though there may have been, for instance, like in Brockton, there's a lot of brooks that have gone through the city, but over the course of time, they've been piped, and the water has gone into either a surface detention basin or a subsurface basin, but FEMA doesn't know that. So as far as they know, the brook is still running through the middle of the city like it did in 1980. And I'm sure there are places all through the county.
So people that have purchased a home can sometimes find, after they purchased a home, in a different zone, which would affect their insurance when FEMA changes the maps?
Yes, yes, and they change the maps not frequently, but within a 5-7 year period, depending upon how many requests they get for like a Loma. So in other words, if they get like 10 or 12 requests in a certain area, then they'll recognize that the map needs to be changed.
So I know you also do a lot of commercial business.
The mainstay of our business is commercial site plan permitting. We've kind of gotten that down to a science, basically, I would say, just in terms of a certain size building on a certain size lot. There are times, of course, when you can't fit the exact building that the client wants, in which cases you have to go to the Board of Appeals and request a variance for it, usually for offsets. We have done a lot of work on buildings that you're familiar with, Walgreens and CVS's, a lot of donut shops. They're everywhere, and so on. But each town has a certain reg, and so before you start the job, you actually have to get the zoning book, meet with the town planner if they have one, will the site work here, and so on and so forth. But every town is different.
So why don't you take a moment to share your contact information with our viewers?
All right. The firm's name is J.K. Holmgren Engineering, Inc. We've been in Brockton on Belmont Street, 1313 Belmont Street, since 1985. Phone number 508-583-2595. Email is basically my name, jholmgren@jkholmgren.com. And we provide the whole gamut of civil engineering and land surveying services.
Anything I might have missed? Any particular service you can think of?
I think you covered it pretty quick. The building we're in used to be a bank. It has a drive-through, but haven't had the opportunity to have anybody drive a check through the drive-through yet.
Or maybe pick up a plan at some point.
We're trying to figure out a way to use it, but it hasn't worked out. But.
So this show is being taped in Plymouth. Anybody out there that is nearby, you're welcome to come by the registry and see our display, History of Recording. We highlight very much the role of surveyor in the recording process, and I have a picture of young George Washington, who started his career as a surveyor.
That's right, he did. He correctly did, yeah.
Great, thanks, John.
John, thank you very much.
Always great to see you.
It's a pleasure to see you, John.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Welcome to Understood.org, a free online resource for the parents of the 1 in 5 kids with learning and attention issues. Here you'll get personalized recommendations, practical tips, daily access to experts, and more. Go from misunderstanding to Understood.org.
Welcome back to the Register's Report. Again, my name is John Buckley. I'm the Register of Deeds of Plymouth County. I want to thank John Holmgren of J.K. Holmgren Engineering for the great description of the role of surveyors and the multi-projects that they work on. It was very informative, I'm sure you'll find. This segment of the show, we always try to do something a little lighter in nature. With the holidays in August, the 4th of August, the United States Coast Guard turned 224 years old. The 4th was International Beard Day. The 7th was Purple Heart Day. 21st, Senior Citizen Day. And a couple notable images we're going to talk about from our Plymouth County Registry of Deeds notable land record collections. One is Hannah Thomas. Hannah Thomas was America's first female lighthouse keeper. Anybody that spends any time on the water down this way will see Gurnet Light on a regular basis, and Gurnet Lighthouse on Gurnet Point on the north side entrance to Plymouth Bay was authorized by the Massachusetts legislature in 1768. It was a wooden dwelling to begin with, and it was the site of North America's first twin lights when the lighthouse was built on land of John and Hannah Thomas. They were the first keepers of the light. When John went off and was killed in the Revolutionary War, Hannah became the first female lighthouse keeper in America. And during the Revolutionary War, the towns of Plymouth, Duxbury, and Kingston erected a fort on that site. In 1802, Hannah and her son sold the lighthouse to the United States government. It's presently cared for by Project Gurnet in Bug Light, and I know they do an opportunity to go visit every year, and I'd advise you to do that. It's quite a beautiful site, and the lighthouse is very inspirational. The next notable record is Brigg Shipyard. In 1747, James Brigg purchased land in Scituate to build a shipyard. He built it on Hobart's Landing, and one of his vessels that were built on that site was the vessel Columbia, the first American vessel to circumnavigate the globe. Left Boston Harbor in 1787 under the command of Captain John Kendrick. In the ship's log, it traveled 50,000 miles, arriving back in Boston Harbor in 1790. It's credited as being the first ship to carry the American flag around the world. Among other voyages, it was commanded by Robert Gray into the discovery of the Columbia River. Many people remember the space shuttle Columbia. It was named after this ship. And one little side note, if you ever look at a bottle of Old Spice aftershave, you'll see an image of a ship, a sketching of a ship, and that ship on that bottle is the ship Columbia. And last but not least, in a notable record done by Susan April, the archivist at Kingston Public Library, of Town Landing. Town Landing in Kingston, the town wharf and public access to the Jones River is from there. It was rebuilt in 2013 by the Waterfront Committee with community preservation funds. It's a beautiful place to visit in the summer. So as we come to an end of the summer in August, still some great opportunities through early fall to go out and visit many of our oceanside sites, and I've brought a few of them to you today and advise you that when you do that, you not only enjoy the wonderful ocean, but you see a lot of Plymouth County history. So I want to thank David Antoine and Ben Alexander from PAC TV for putting this show together, and I'll see you next month.